The howling wind whipped through Penelope Blackett's skirts as she clutched the flickering lantern tighter, its dim glow her only defense against the encroaching darkness of the Arizona territory. The stage coach had abandoned her at a desolate way station miles from Quartz Site when the late October storm of 1885 made the roads impassable, leaving her alone with her trunk, her letters from a prospective husband she'd never met, and the terrifying realization that she might freeze to death before ever reaching her new life. Penelope gripped her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders as she peered into the swirling snow. The small way station building had provided little shelter once its roof had partially collapsed under the weight of accumulating ice. She'd made the desperate decision to follow what she believed was the road, hoping to encounter another traveler or reach the next station. That had been hours ago, before the early sunset had robbed her of bearings and hope alike. "Hello." She called out, her voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. "Is anyone there?" Her feet, wrapped in city boots ill-suited for such conditions, had long since gone numb. The 23-year-old Boston native had never imagined such brutal weather when she'd answered the advertisement in the matrimonial news 3 months prior. The description had painted Arizona as a land of sunshine and opportunity, where a hardworking man named Adam Ingram sought a refined Eastern lady of good moral character and domestic skills to be his wife. The letters that followed had been cordial, businesslike an arrangement more than a courtship. But they offered Penelope escape from the grim future that awaited her in Boston following her parents' passing and the revelation of their overwhelming debts. Mr. Ingram had sent money for her passage, along with a simple map of how to reach his ranch once she arrived in Quartz Site. But that map was useless now, soaked through in her pocket. The stagecoach driver had warned her about the storm brewing on the horizon, but neither had anticipated its ferocity or how quickly it would descend upon them. A violent gust nearly knocked Penelope off her feet. The lantern swung wildly, its flame dangerously close to extinguishing. She stifled a sob. If the light went out, she would truly be lost. "Please," she whispered, though to whom she wasn't certain. "Please help me." As if in answer, her lantern caught a reflection in the distance, something metallic perhaps, or a window. Penelope froze, straining her eyes. Yes, there was definitely a faint light ahead. With renewed determination, she pushed forward, each step a battle against the driving snow. The light grew larger, and soon she could make out the silhouette of a small cabin. Smoke curled from its chimney, disappearing into the white chaos above. Penelope's heart leapt with hope as she pressed on, her numb fingers barely managing to keep hold of the lantern. When she finally reached the cabin door, she had just enough strength left to pound on it weakly. The door swung open almost immediately, revealing a tall man with broad shoulders, his expression shifting rapidly from wariness to concern. "Good Lord," he exclaimed, taking in her snow-covered form. "What in blazes are you doing out in this storm?" Before Penelope could answer, her legs buckled beneath her. The man moved with surprising swiftness, catching her before she hit the floor. The lantern slipped from her grasp, but he somehow managed to catch that too, preventing a fire. The stage coach," she mumbled through chattering teeth. "Save your explanations," the man said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Let's get you warm first." He carried her to a chair near the fire, then quickly closed the door against the howling storm. Penelope caught glimpses of a simple but tidy cabin interior as she fought to remain conscious. The man wrapped a thick blanket around her shoulders and pushed a mug of something hot into her trembling hands. "Drink," he instructed. "It's just coffee, but it's hot," she obeyed, letting the bitter liquid warm her from the inside. As sensation painfully returned to her extremities, she was able to study her rescuer. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly where it met the collar of his flannel shirt. His face was weathered from the sun, with the beginnings of crow's feet at the corners of his eyes. Those eyes, she noted, were a striking blue that reminded her of summer skies, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. "Thank you," she managed after several sips. "I fear you've saved my life, Mr. Ingram, he replied. Adam Ingram. Penelope nearly dropped the mug. Ingram, you wouldn't happen to know an Alfred Ingram, would you? The man's expression darkened. He was my brother. He passed away 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him quick. The shock of this news momentarily pushed aside Penelope's physical discomfort. Your brother, but I'm supposed to marry him. I'm Penelope Blackett. Adam Ingram stared at her, comprehension slowly dawning on his face. You're the mail-order bride. Penelope nodded weakly, tears welling in her eyes. Not only was she stranded in a blizzard, but the future she had journeyed so far to claim had vanished before she even arrived. I didn't know, Adam said, running a hand through his hair. Alfred handled all his own correspondence. I found some letters in his desk after he died, but I didn't. I had no way to contact you. So I've traveled all this way for nothing, Penelope whispered. Adam's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry you weren't notified. I've been trying to keep the ranch going. There's been no time for much else. A silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the howling wind outside. Penelope's mind raced. What would she do now? She had no money to return east and no prospects awaiting her there, even if she could. Your feet, Adam said suddenly, kneeling before her. We need to warm them properly before frostbite sets in. Without waiting for permission, he removed her sodden boots and stockings. His hands were calloused but gentle as he examined her feet, which were alarmingly red and swollen. This might hurt, he warned before submerging her feet in a basin of lukewarm water he quickly prepared. Penelope gasped at the painful tingling sensation but didn't pull away. You're lucky, Adam said as he worked. Doesn't look like any permanent damage, but it was a near thing. What were you thinking, traveling alone in weather like this? The storm wasn't this severe when we left the last station, she defended herself. And I wasn't alone until the coach driver deemed the road too dangerous and left me at a waystation. He said another coach would come, but none did. When the roof began to collapse from the snow, I thought following the road was my only chance. Adam frowned. Which driver was this, Jackson? I believe so, yes. I'll have words with him when this storm passes, he muttered, leaving a woman alone at that old wreck of a waystation. It's unconscionable. Penelope felt a strange flutter at his indignation on her behalf. It wasn't entirely his fault. He warned me it might be days before another coach came through. Still, Adam insisted, there are standards of decency out here despite what Easterners might think of us. As her feet began to regain feeling, Penelope took a moment to survey the cabin more carefully. It was a single room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a desk piled with papers, a narrow bed in one corner, and various tools of ranch life hanging on the walls. Through the window, she could make out the shadowy forms of what appeared to be a barn and corral, though the snow obscured most details. This isn't the main house, she surmised. Adam shook his head. No, madam, the ranch house is another mile west. This is the line cabin where I've been staying since. He trailed off, but Penelope understood, since his brother died. I'm sorry for your loss, she said softly. Adam nodded once in acknowledgement, but offered no further comment on the matter. You'll need dry clothes, he said instead, moving to a trunk at the foot of the bed. He pulled out a flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. These will swallow you whole, but they're dry. Penelope looked at the men's clothing dubiously. In Boston, the mere suggestion of donning men's attire would have caused a scandal. But Boston felt very far away, and hypothermia was a much more pressing concern than propriety. I'll step outside while you change, Adam offered, moving toward the door. In this storm, Penelope objected. You'll freeze, Adam hesitated, clearly caught between chivalry and practicality. Perhaps you could just turn around, Penelope suggested, her cheeks flushing. I'll be quick. Adam nodded, turning to face the wall. Penelope changed as rapidly as her still clumsy fingers would allow, grateful for the warmth of the dry clothing despite how it hung on her frame. She rolled up the sleeves and pant legs as best she could. I'm decent, she announced when she'd finished. Adam turned back, his expression unreadable as he took in her appearance. We'll need to hang your things to dry, he said, gathering her sodden dress, petticoats, and stockings. He arranged them carefully on a line near the fire, maintaining a respectful distance from her undergarments. "Are you hungry?" he asked. As if in answer, Penelope's stomach growled audibly. She hadn't eaten since a meager breakfast at dawn. "I'll take that as a yes," Adam said, the hint of a smile briefly softening his features. He moved to the small stove and began preparing a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and biscuits from a warming drawer. While he worked, Penelope's thoughts returned to her predicament. "Mr. Ingram," she began. "Adam," he corrected. "Might as well given the circumstances." "Adam," she repeated. "What happens now? With your brother gone, the arrangement I had is void." He paused in his cooking, keeping his back to her. "That depends on what you want, Miss Blackett. I can take you into town when the storm passes, likely be a few days by the look of it. The stage coach runs back east every Tuesday." "I can't go back," she said simply. "I sold everything to come here." Adam turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "Quartzsite's growing. They might need a school teacher, or perhaps you could find work at the hotel." Penelope nodded slowly, but her heart sank. The prospect of arriving in a strange town with no connections and dwindling funds was daunting. "What about the ranch?" she asked. "Your brother wrote that it was prospering." A shadow crossed Adam's face. Alfred was always more optimistic in his letters than reality warranted. "The ranch is surviving, not prospering. This drought's been hard on everyone. But you're maintaining it." "I'm trying." He turned back to the stove, stirring the beans with more force than necessary. "It's not easy alone." Penelope considered this. "I came west to work, Mr. Ingram. Adam, I'm not afraid of hard labor and I'm a quick learner." He glanced at her over his shoulder, skepticism evident. "Ranching isn't like city life. It's dawn to dusk every day, regardless of weather or how you're feeling. And no offense, madam, but you don't strike me as someone accustomed to that kind of work." Penelope straightened her spine, indignation flaring. "My father was a merchant who lost everything in poor investments before he died. For the past year, I've worked as a seamstress 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, in conditions that would make your barn seem luxurious. I came west because working myself to death for someone else's profit held no appeal. At least here, the work would be my own." Adam turned fully to face her, reassessing her with newfound respect. "My apologies for the assumption," he paused. "Still, a ranch is no place for a woman alone." "I wouldn't be alone," Penelope pointed out. "You're here." Their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Adam broke the connection first, returning to his cooking. "We can discuss arrangements once the storm passes," he said finally, spooning beans onto 2 tin plates. "For now, let's focus on getting you fully warmed and fed." He handed her a plate and settled across from her with his own. They ate in silence for a few minutes, Penelope trying not to show how ravenous she was while savoring every bite of the simple but filling meal. "The stew is good," she offered, hoping to ease the tension. "It's just beans," Adam replied, but she detected a hint of pride in his voice. "My brother was the one who answered the advertisement," Adam said suddenly. "He was always talking about finding a wife, building up the ranch into something bigger. He had dreams." His voice held a complexity of emotions: fondness, exasperation, grief. "What about you?" Penelope asked. "Do you share those dreams?" Adam considered the question. "I'm more practical. The land is harsh out here. Best to focus on surviving before thinking about thriving." He set his empty plate aside. "What about you? What were you hoping to find out west?" Penelope chose her words carefully. "Security at first, a home that couldn't be taken away by creditors, but also purpose. In Boston, my options were limited to teaching children or sewing until my eyesight failed. Out here, I thought perhaps there would be more possibilities." "There are," Adam acknowledged. "But also more dangers, like blizzards in October," she said with a small smile, among other things. He didn't return her smile, but his expression softened slightly. "You should rest. Take the bed, I'll sleep in the chair." "I couldn't possibly. You nearly froze to death tonight," he interrupted. "You need proper rest. I've slept in worse places than this chair." Penelope wanted to protest further, but exhaustion was quickly overtaking her. "Thank you," she conceded. Adam banked the fire while Penelope settled into the narrow bed, which smelled of soap and pine. Despite her fatigue, she found herself watching him move efficiently around the cabin, securing everything for the night. "Adam," she said as he settled into the chair with a blanket. "Do you think the storm will last long?" He glanced toward the window where snow still pelted against the glass. "Hard to say. These early storms can be unpredictable. Could be a day, could be 3. The implication hung in the air between them. They might be confined together in this small cabin for several days. Penelope wasn't sure if the flutter in her stomach was anxiety or something else entirely. "We'll be fine," Adam assured her, seeming to read her thoughts. "Get some sleep." Penelope closed her eyes, listening to the howling wind and the occasional crackle from the fire. Despite her precarious circumstances, she felt surprisingly safe. As sleep claimed her, she realized she was still clutching the last letter from Alfred Ingram in her pocket, the letter that had brought her to this place, to this moment, to his brother. Morning came with a blinding white brightness. Penelope woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until her eyes landed on Adam, already awake and stoking the fire. Outside, the storm appeared to have lessened, though snow still fell steadily. "You're up," Adam noted, straightening. "How are you feeling?" Penelope took stock of her body. Her feet were tender but no longer numb, and the bone-deep chill had receded. "Better, thank you." Hungry, she nodded, suddenly aware of her rumpled appearance. She smoothed a hand over her hair, which had come loose from its pins during the night. "There's water in the basin if you want to wash," Adam offered, nodding toward a corner of the cabin where he'd placed a pitcher and basin. "I'll start breakfast." Grateful for the chance to make herself presentable, Penelope quickly washed her face and hands, then did her best to arrange her hair without the aid of a mirror. When she finished, Adam had coffee brewing and was frying salt pork and eggs in a cast-iron pan. "The chickens at the main ranch would be mighty surprised to see their eggs being enjoyed in this storm," he commented as he served her portion. "You walked to the ranch house in this weather?" Penelope asked. Alarmed, Adam shook his head. "No, madam. I brought supplies here when I first noticed the storm building. Always better to be prepared out here." They ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness of the previous night somewhat diminished in the light of day. After breakfast, Adam pulled on his heavy coat. "I need to check on the horses in the barn," he explained. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" "Of course, I could come with you," she offered. "I'd like to be useful." Adam hesitated, then nodded. "Bundle up, your coat should be dry enough now." Penelope's coat was indeed dry, though it felt stiff from its impromptu drying method. She pulled it on over Adam's flannel shirt, which she had slept in, and accepted the woolen scarf he offered. The cold hit her like a physical blow when they stepped outside. The snow reached halfway up her calves, and the wind, while not as vicious as the night before, still cut through her clothing. Adam forged a path ahead of her, breaking through the deeper drift so she could follow in his footsteps. The barn was only about 50 yards from the cabin, but the journey felt much longer. Inside, it was markedly warmer, sheltered from the wind and warmed by the bodies of 2 horses who nickered at their entrance. "This is Duke," Adam said, patting a sturdy brown gelding. "And this pretty lady is Sadie." The second horse was a dappled gray mare who immediately nuzzled Adam's pocket in search of treats. "You're out of luck today, girl," he told the horse, though he stroked her neck affectionately. Penelope approached cautiously. "May I, of course." Sadie loves attention. Penelope reached out to stroke the mare's soft nose, delighted when the horse leaned into her touch. "She's beautiful." "And she knows it," Adam said with a hint of amusement. "Makes her difficult sometimes, but she's the smartest horse I've ever worked with." He showed Penelope how to measure out feed for the horses, then demonstrated how he checked each animal for signs of distress or injury. His hands moved with practiced confidence, and his voice took on a gentler quality when speaking to the animals. Penelope found herself watching his face more than his actions, fascinated by this glimpse of the man beneath the stoic exterior. "You're good with them," she observed. Adam shrugged. "We understand each other. Better than people." He glanced at her, surprised by the perceptiveness of the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Horses don't pretend to be something they're not, and people do, in my experience." He returned to brushing Duke's coat with long, methodical strokes. Penelope leaned against a post, watching him work. "Your brother, was he very different from you?" Adam's rhythm faltered briefly before resuming. Like day and night, Alfred was all big plans and smooth talk, could charm just about anyone into anything. There was fondness in his voice, but also something harder to define. He was the one who convinced our parents to stake their savings on this ranch, said it would make us all rich within 5 years. But it didn't. Adam shook his head. Land's too dry for the kind of cattle operation he envisioned. We've managed to hang on, but it's been by adapting to what the land will support, not by forcing it to be something it isn't. He set the brush down. Our parents passed 2 years ago, within months of each other. After that, Alfred started looking east for new investment, new blood. For a wife, Penelope supplied. Yes, Adam met her eyes directly. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but you should know Alfred wasn't just seeking companionship. He needed money to keep his dreams alive. Penelope felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I have no money, Mr. Ingram. That's why I answered the advertisement. I figured as much, Adam sighed. Alfred wasn't always forthcoming about his motivations. The implication stung. Had she traveled thousands of miles based on false pretenses? The thought was dismaying, but also strangely liberating. She was free of any obligation to a man who might have seen her merely as a financial opportunity. Thank you for your honesty, she said finally. Adam nodded, looking somewhat relieved. It seemed only fair you should know. They finished tending to the horses in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they prepared to brave the weather again, Adam paused at the barn door. For what it's worth, he said, not quite meeting her eyes, I think Alfred would have been fortunate to have you as a wife, regardless of your financial situation. Before Penelope could respond to this unexpected compliment, he pushed the door open and stepped into the swirling snow. She followed, touched by his words and increasingly curious about this complex man who had saved her life. Back in the cabin, they fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Adam showed Penelope where everything was kept and accepted her offer to prepare lunch while he worked on repairing a saddle that needed attention. As she moved around the small kitchen area, she became aware of his occasional glances in her direction, quickly averted when she turned his way. Tell me about the ranch, she requested as they ate the simple stew she had prepared. What's it like when there isn't a blizzard obscuring everything? Adam's expression brightened subtly. It's beautiful, he said with quiet conviction. The land rolls out toward the mountains to the west. In spring, there are wildflowers that carpet the lower meadows, blue lupines and orange poppies mostly. Summer brings its challenges with the heat, but the sunsets make it worthwhile, all that open sky turning gold and purple. He trailed off, seemingly embarrassed by his poetic turn. It sounds lovely, Penelope encouraged him. How large is the property? 600 acres, though only about a quarter of it is suitable for grazing. We run fewer cattle than most operations our size, but healthier ones, quality over quantity. There was pride in his voice now. There's a creek that runs year-round on the north edge that's rare and valuable out here. We've been working on irrigation to make better use of it. We, Penelope inquired, me and Martinez, our ranch hand, he's been with us since the beginning. Lives in a cabin near the main house with his wife, Elena. They have a little boy, about 5 now. Adam's expression softened at the mention of the child. Good people, loyal. It sounds like you've built something worthwhile, Penelope observed. Adam considered this. We've survived, he said eventually. That counts for something out here. As the day progressed, the storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, the wind seemed to intensify again as darkness fell. Penelope found herself oddly grateful for the enforced confinement. It gave her time to consider her options and, increasingly, to learn more about the quiet man who shared the small space with her. By unspoken agreement, they avoided further discussion of Alfred and the arrangement that had brought Penelope west. Instead, Adam told her about the challenges of ranching in the Arizona territory, while she shared stories of her life in Boston before her parents' deaths. Neither spoke directly of their futures, though the question hung in the air between them. That night, despite Penelope's protests, Adam again insisted she take the bed while he slept in the chair. As she drifted off to sleep, she found herself wondering what it might be like to stay, to be part of the world he had described with such understated passion. The next morning brought unexpected sunshine. Penelope woke to bright light streaming through the cabin windows and the sound of Adam moving quietly around the room. "The storm's broken," he announced when he noticed she was awake. "Still plenty of snow, but the sky's clear." Penelope sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. "That's good news, isn't it?" "It is," Adam agreed, "though the roads won't be passable for a few more days, especially for a wagon or coach." The implication was clear they would remain confined together a while longer. Penelope found she didn't mind the prospect as much as propriety suggested she should. After breakfast, they ventured outside again to tend to the horses. The world had been transformed overnight into a glistening white landscape that took Penelope's breath away. The sun reflected blindingly off the snow, and icicles hung from the cabin eaves like crystal decorations. "It's beautiful," she breathed, forgetting for a moment how dangerous this same beauty had been just 2 nights before. Adam watched her reaction with a hint of a smile. "Different from Boston, I imagine." "Completely," she agreed. "There's so much space." "That's what gets most Easterners," Adam observed. "The scale of things out here makes a person feel small, but not you," he considered the question. "It reminds me of my place in the world." "That's not a bad thing." In the barn, as they worked together to feed and groom the horses, Penelope found herself watching Adam's hands, strong, capable hands that moved with purpose and gentleness. There was something deeply appealing about his quiet competence, so different from the polished manners of the men she had known in Boston. "Would you like to learn to ride?" Adam asked suddenly, catching her watching him. Penelope blinked in surprise. "Now, in the snow." "Not now," he conceded with a hint of amusement. "But once the weather clears, Sadie's gentle enough for a beginner." "I'd like that," Penelope said, touched by the offer. It suggested a future that extended beyond their current confinement, though neither of them had addressed what would happen when the roads cleared. They spent the rest of the morning in the barn, with Adam showing Penelope basic care for the horses and explaining more about the ranch operations. When they returned to the cabin for lunch, Adam seemed more relaxed than she had yet seen him, the perpetual tension in his shoulders somewhat eased. As Penelope prepared a simple meal from their supplies, she found herself imagining what it would be like to do this every day, to work alongside Adam, to care for the animals, to watch the seasons change across the vast landscape he had described. The vision was startlingly appealing. "Something smells good," Adam commented as he built up the fire. "Just biscuits and beans again, I'm afraid," Penelope replied. "I've done my best to make them interesting with what spices you have." "You don't need to worry about impressing me with your cooking," Adam said. "The fact that you can cook it all puts you ahead of me. I can manage the basics, but that's about it." "Did your brother cook?" Penelope asked, then immediately regretted bringing up Alfred again. Adam didn't seem bothered by the question. "Alfred couldn't boil water without burning it," he said with a hint of fond exasperation. "Elena Martinez's wife, she'd bring food over sometimes, or I'd cook when I was at the main house. Alfred was many things, but domestic wasn't one of them." Penelope set 2 plates on the small table. "And you? Do you consider yourself domestic?" Adam took his seat across from her. "I'm practical. Living alone, you either learn to take care of yourself or you don't last long. You never married," Penelope ventured, then blushed at her own boldness. If Adam was surprised by the personal question, he didn't show it. "Never found the time," he said simply, though something in his tone suggested there was more to the story. They ate in companionable silence for a while before Adam spoke again. "What about you? Why did you choose a newspaper advertisement over the usual methods of finding a husband?" It was a fair question, though not easily answered. Penelope considered her words carefully. "After my parents died, I found myself in a difficult position. Their debts consumed what little inheritance there might have been. I had skills reading, writing, basic arithmetic, sewing, but no formal training for a profession. The few suitors who had shown interest disappeared once my financial situation became known. She met his eyes directly. I'm not naive, Mr. Ingram. Marriage has always been, at least in part, an economic arrangement. The advertisement offered honesty about that aspect from the beginning. Adam held her gaze, his expression thoughtful. And the man himself, did that matter to you at all? Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks. Of course it mattered. Your brother's letters suggested a man of ambition and vision, someone building something worthwhile. She hesitated. I hoped that respect and companionship might grow, even if it didn't begin with romance. And now? Adam asked quietly, with Alfred gone and those plans undone. It was the question that had hovered between them since her arrival. Penelope looked down at her plate. Now I must find a new path, I suppose. Adam was silent for a long moment. There's still a place for you here if you want it, he said finally. Penelope's head snapped up. What do you mean? Adam shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The ranch still needs tending. There's work for willing hands. He cleared his throat. I'm not proposing anything improper. There's the main house where you could stay, or arrangements could be made in town if you prefer. You're offering me employment, Penelope clarified. For now, Adam said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that suggested more than his words conveyed. Until you decide what you want. The offer hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Penelope felt her heart quicken. I'd like to see the ranch properly before I decide, she said carefully, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. Adam nodded, seeming relieved. As soon as the snow melts enough, I'll take you there. The conversation shifted to more practical matters than what skills Penelope had that might be useful on a ranch, what she would need to learn. Adam described the main house, which sounded modest but comfortable with 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a small parlor. By the time they finished their meal, they had sketched out a tentative plan for Penelope's integration into ranch life, contingent on her final decision once she had seen the place. As they cleared away the dishes, their hands brushed briefly. Penelope felt a jolt of awareness at the contact, and when she glanced up at Adam, she found him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. For a moment, neither moved, caught in some unspoken recognition. Then Adam stepped back, breaking the spell. I should check on the horses again, he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. Penelope nodded, suddenly unable to trust her own voice. As she watched him pull on his coat and step outside, she pressed a hand to her racing heart. What was happening to her? 2 days ago, she had been a mail-order bride traveling to meet a stranger. Now she was contemplating a life on a struggling ranch with a man she barely knew, a man who made her pulse quicken with a mere look. Yet something about it felt right, as if the path she had started on had been redirected toward where she was truly meant to be. Penelope Blackett, who had always prided herself on practicality, found herself entertaining notions that seemed more fitting for the romantic novels she occasionally indulged in back in Boston. She shook her head at her own fanciful thoughts and set about organizing the cabin's sparse supplies. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same determination that had brought her west in the first place. The afternoon passed quickly as Penelope found ways to make herself useful. She mended a torn shirt of Adam's that she found in his trunk, organized the kitchen shelves, and took inventory of their remaining food supplies. Adam spent much of his time in the barn, returning occasionally to warm himself by the fire before heading out again. By evening, the temperature had dropped dramatically, and Adam returned to the cabin with a concerned expression. The weather's turning again, he reported as he stamped snow from his boots. Not another blizzard, I don't think, but cold enough to freeze a man solid if he's not careful. Penelope moved to stoke the fire. The horses? They're fine. I've given them extra feed and made sure their blankets are secure. Adam hung his coat by the door and rubbed his hands together to warm them. We should be all right as long as the firewood holds out. They worked together to prepare a simple supper, moving around each other in the small space with increasing ease, as if they had been doing this dance for years rather than days. Afterward, Adam pulled out a battered deck of cards and taught Penelope to play poker, using beans as betting chips. Her quick mind and observant nature made her a fast learner, and soon she was winning more hands than she lost. "You're a natural card sharp," Adam accused good-naturedly after she took another pot. "Sure you haven't played before?" Penelope laughed, the sound brightening the rustic cabin. "I promise. Though I did used to watch my father play with his business associates, perhaps I learned more than I realized." "Remind me never to play for real money," Adam said with a rare smile that transformed his face, softening the hard angles and bringing a warmth to his eyes that made Penelope's heart skip. As the evening wore on, the wind picked up outside, howling around the cabin's corners and occasionally sending drafts through unseen cracks. Penelope shivered despite the fire's warmth. "Here," Adam said, noticing her discomfort. He retrieved a quilt from a trunk and draped it around her shoulders. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary, and Penelope found herself wishing he wouldn't pull away. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at him. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Adam's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, a question in his expression. Penelope felt herself leaning toward him almost unconsciously. A sudden violent gust of wind rattled the window, breaking the moment. Adam straightened, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. "It's getting late," he said, his voice gruff. "We should turn in." Penelope nodded, both disappointed and relieved. Whatever was building between them needed time for her to be certain of her own feelings. Time for them to know each other beyond the extraordinary circumstances that had thrown them together. As they prepared for sleep, following the now familiar routine of banking the fire and securing the cabin for the night, Penelope found herself watching Adam covertly. There was a grace to his movements, an economy of motion that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. So different from the polished gentleman of Boston society, yet infinitely more compelling to her. When Adam again insisted she take the bed while he made do with the chair, Penelope surprised herself by saying, "This is ridiculous. The bed is narrow but adequate for two if we're careful. We're both adults and it's freezing tonight." Adam stared at her, clearly caught off guard by the suggestion. "Miss Blackett, Penelope," she corrected him, "and I'm being practical, not improper. We'll keep our clothes on and stay on opposite sides. It makes no sense for you to freeze in that chair for a third night when there's a perfectly good bed." Adam looked like he wanted to argue, but another blast of cold air through the cabin seemed to decide him. "Very well," he conceded, "but I'll sleep on top of the covers, you take the blankets." It was a compromise Penelope could accept. She slipped under the covers while Adam extinguished the lamp, then felt the mattress dip as he settled beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance between them. In the darkness, with only the faint glow of the banked fire providing any light, Penelope was acutely aware of Adam's proximity, the sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him. "Good night, Adam," she whispered. "Good night, Penelope," he replied, her name sounding different somehow in his deep voice. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion soon pulled Penelope toward sleep. Her last conscious thought was that she felt safer here, in this precarious situation with a man she barely knew than she had in years. Sometime in the night, Penelope woke to find that she had moved in her sleep. Her head rested on Adam's shoulder and his arm had wrapped around her, holding her close. For a moment she remained perfectly still, absorbing the sensation of being held. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with tenderness. Adam's breathing remained deep and even, suggesting he was still asleep. Penelope knew she should move away, return to her side of the bed. But the warmth and comfort of their current position was too tempting, especially with the cold air biting at her nose and cheeks. She allowed herself to sink back into sleep, nestled against him. When she next opened her eyes, early morning light was filtering through the cabin windows, and she was alone in the bed. She sat up to find Adam already dressed and stoking the fire, his back to her. Good morning, she said, her voice still husky with sleep. Adam turned, his expression carefully neutral. Morning, sleep well. Had he been awake during the night? Did he remember holding her? Penelope couldn't tell from his demeanor. Yes, thank you, she replied, deciding not to mention their nocturnal closeness. How's the weather? Better, Adam said, moving to the window. Temperature's rising. Snow will start melting today if the sun stays out. Does that mean we can travel to the ranch soon? Penelope asked, trying to ignore the flutter of disappointment at the thought of leaving this intimate cocoon they had created. Adam nodded. Tomorrow, I think, if conditions continue to improve, we'll take it slow, but the horses should manage well enough. He seemed more reserved this morning, keeping his distance as they prepared and ate breakfast. Penelope wondered if she had somehow overstepped by suggesting they share the bed, or if he regretted the growing closeness between them. Is everything all right? She finally asked as they washed the breakfast dishes together. Adam paused, a plate in his hands. Yes, he said, then sighed. No, he set the plate down carefully. Penelope, I need to be honest with you. Her heart sank. Here it came, he was going to rescind his offer, tell her it would be best if she continued to town after all. I'm not Alfred, Adam said, his voice low and intense. I don't have his way with words or his grand vision. What I can offer is modest hard work, a simple life and honesty, that's all. Penelope stared at him, surprised by this turn. I never thought you were like your brother, she said softly. But you came west to marry him, Adam pointed out, to be part of his dream. I came west for a fresh start, Penelope corrected him, to build something meaningful. The man I corresponded with was just words on paper. The man who rescued me from that blizzard, who has shown me nothing but kindness and respect, that's a real person I'm coming to know. She took a deep breath, and to like very much. Adam's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, his expression softened. I find myself thinking about what it might be like to have you stay, he admitted. Not as an employee, as more. The simple words sent a thrill through Penelope. I've been thinking the same, she confessed. For a long moment, they stood looking at each other, the dishes forgotten. Then Adam stepped closer slowly, as if giving her time to retreat if she wished. Penelope held her ground, her heart pounding. When he was just inches away, Adam raised a hand to her face, his touch feather light against her cheek. May I? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Penelope nodded, unable to form words. Adam leaned down, closing the distance between them, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened as Penelope responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing faster, Adam rested his forehead against hers. I had no right to do that, he murmured. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't, Penelope replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Adam's low chuckle sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. Still, he said, stepping back slightly though he kept hold of her hands, this is happening fast. You should see the ranch, meet Martinez and Alina, spend time in town. Be sure this is what you want before anything is decided. His restraint only increased Penelope's respect for him. That sounds wise, she agreed, though part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind. But I already know I want to stay, at least long enough to find out if what I'm feeling could grow into something lasting. Adam's expression brightened with hope. Then we'll ride to the ranch tomorrow, weather permitting. He squeezed her hands once before releasing them, and for now, perhaps we should finish these dishes before we forget ourselves again. They spent the rest of the day in a state of heightened awareness of each other, their previous ease now complicated by acknowledged attraction. Adam taught Penelope more about caring for the horses, explaining that she would need to be comfortable around them for ranch life. She proved an apt pupil, overcoming her initial nervousness to brush Sadie's coat and even help check her hooves under Adam's patient guidance. That night, they again shared the bed, though with a new understanding between them. Adam still stayed atop the covers, maintaining a token separation, but when Penelope woke in the night, she found his arm around her waist and her back pressed against his chest. This time she was certain he was awake, his breathing too controlled for sleep. Is this all right? he whispered when he felt her stir. Yes, she answered simply, placing her hand over his where it rested at her waist. They remained that way until morning, a chaste but intimate embrace that promised more to come when the time was right. The next day dawned clear and noticeably warmer. After a quick breakfast, they set about preparing for the journey to the main ranch. Adam packed the few supplies they had used during their stay, while Penelope gathered her meager belongings. "What about my trunk?" she asked, suddenly remembering the luggage she had been forced to abandon at the way station. "We'll send someone for it once we're at the ranch," Adam assured her. "Martinez can take the wagon when the roads are clearer." In the barn, Adam saddled both horses. "You'll ride Sadie," he told Penelope. "She's steady and will follow Duke's lead. Just hold the reins loose and let her do the work." Despite his reassurances, Penelope felt a flutter of anxiety as Adam helped her mount. She had never been on a horse before, and the ground suddenly seemed very far away. Adam adjusted her posture and hand position, his touch professional but gentle. "You're a natural," he encouraged her when she managed to walk Sadie in a small circle around the barn. "Ready to try it outside?" The snow had indeed begun to melt, but there were still deep drifts in places. Adam led the way on Duke, choosing the easiest path through the white landscape. Penelope followed, gradually growing more comfortable with the mare's steady gait. The journey to the main ranch took nearly 2 hours, though Adam assured her it was normally a 20-minute ride. The snow slowed their progress, and Adam was careful to set an easy pace for Penelope's sake. Despite the cold, Penelope found herself enjoying the ride. The vast white landscape glittered in the sunlight, and the mountains Adam had mentioned were visible in the distance, majestic and snow-capped. "There it is," Adam said eventually, pointing ahead to where a cluster of buildings came into view. "Ingram Ranch." Penelope felt a flutter of both excitement and apprehension as they approached. This could be her home, if things worked out as she was beginning to hope they might. The main house was larger than she had imagined from Adam's description, a sturdy 2-story structure built of weathered wood with a covered porch running along the front. Nearby stood a large barn, several corrals, and what appeared to be bunkhouses and storage buildings. A smaller cabin sat about 100 yards from the main house, smoke curling from its chimney. As they rode into the yard, a man emerged from the barn shorter than Adam but powerfully built, with dark hair and skin weathered by the sun. He raised a hand in greeting, then stopped short when he spotted Penelope. "Senor Ingram," he called out, hurrying forward to help Adam dismount. "You found someone in the storm, Martinez," Adam acknowledged with a nod. "This is Miss Penelope Blackett." She was on her way here when the stagecoach abandoned her. Martinez's eyes widened in recognition. "The bride from Boston, but how?" His gaze darted between them, clearly noting that Penelope wore Adam's clothes beneath her coat. "It's a long story," Adam said. "Is Alina at home?" "Miss Blackett could use a hot meal and some proper clothes." She, of course." Martinez turned toward the smaller cabin and called out something in Spanish. A woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. She hurried over when she saw them, her warm brown eyes taking in the situation quickly. "Welcome, señorita," she said to Penelope, her English accented but clear. Come inside where it's warm. We have much to talk about, yes." Alina took charge with brisk efficiency, ushering Penelope toward the main house while the men tended to the horses. Inside, Penelope found a home that was simple but welcoming, with solid furniture, colorful woven rugs, and a fire blazing in the stone fireplace. "You must be tired and cold," Alina said, helping Penelope remove her coat. "I will prepare a bath for you and find some clothes. We are not the same size, but I can adjust things until your trunk arrives." "Thank you," Penelope said, touched by the woman's kindness. "I don't want to be a burden." Alina waved away her concern. "It is no burden to help a friend," she assured her. "Adam has explained about Senor Alfred," Penelope nodded. "Yes, though I didn't know until I arrived at the line cabin. I'm very sorry for your loss." Alina crossed herself quickly. "God rest his soul." "He was a good man in his way, though." She hesitated. "Though perhaps not the husband you were expecting, yes," Penelope wasn't quite sure how to respond to this frank assessment. "I never met him," she said carefully. "We only exchanged letters." Elena's knowing gaze suggested she understood more than Penelope was saying. "And now you are here with Adam instead. Perhaps fate has a different plan for you." Before Penelope could respond to this observation, a small boy darted into the room, stopping short when he saw a stranger. His dark eyes, so like his mother's, widened with curiosity. "Miguel," Elena scolded gently in Spanish before switching to English. "Where are your manners? Say hello to Miss Blackett." "Hello," the boy said shyly. "Are you going to live here now, Miguel?" Elena exclaimed, but Penelope laughed. "I'm not sure yet," she told the child honestly. "I'm still getting to know the place." This seemed to satisfy Miguel, who soon warmed to her presence, especially when Penelope showed interest in the wooden horse he carried. By the time Adam and Martinez entered the house, Penelope was seated on the floor with Miguel, admiring his collection of carved animals. Adam paused in the doorway, taking in the domestic scene with an expression that made Penelope's heart quicken. There was longing there and hope and something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. "I see you've met our little cowboy," Adam said, coming to join them. He ruffled Miguel's hair affectionately. "Has he shown you his prized steer yet?" Miguel immediately scrambled to retrieve the carving in question, proudly displaying it to Penelope. "Uncle Adam made it for me," he announced. "He makes the best ones." Penelope looked up at Adam in surprise. "You carved these?" A hint of color touched his cheeks. "Just a hobby during the winter months," he said, clearly embarrassed by the attention. "Nothing special." "They're beautiful," Penelope insisted, examining the steer more closely. The detail was remarkable, from the curve of the horns to the texture of the coat. "You're very talented." Before Adam could demur further, Elena announced that the bath was ready. "Come, señorita," she said, beckoning Penelope toward the stairs. "The men can entertain themselves while you refresh yourself." In a small room upstairs, Elena had prepared a copper tub filled with steaming water. Clean towels and a simple cotton dress lay nearby. "It will be too short, I think," Elena said apologetically, "but it will serve until we can adjust something better." "It's perfect," Penelope assured her. "Thank you for your kindness." Left alone, Penelope sank gratefully into the warm water, washing away the grime of travel and the lingering chill of the storm. As she soaked, she found herself thinking about the scene downstairs, Adam with Miguel, the easy affection between them, the sense of family that permeated this place despite Alfred's recent passing. It was a glimpse of what life could be like here, and it called to something deep within her. Clean and dressed in Elena's borrowed clothes, Penelope felt more like herself than she had in days. She made her way back downstairs to find Adam alone in the main room, staring into the fire. "Where is everyone?" she asked. He turned at the sound of her voice, his expression softening as he took in her appearance. "Martinez and Elena took Miguel home to prepare dinner. They've invited us to join them later." He paused. "You look rested." "I feel human again," Penelope said with a smile. "Thank you for bringing me here." Adam moved closer, stopping within arm's reach. "What do you think of the ranch, I mean? It's lovely," Penelope said honestly. "I can see why you love it here. It's not what you're used to," Adam pointed out. "Life here is hard, especially for a woman. The winters are harsh and the summers can be brutally hot. The nearest town is miles away and neighbors even further." "You're trying to discourage me," Penelope observed, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm trying to be honest," Adam corrected her. "Before you make any decisions, you should know exactly what you'd be committing to." Penelope appreciated his straightforwardness, even as she recognized the vulnerability behind it. He was giving her a chance to withdraw gracefully if the reality didn't match her expectations. "Show me," she requested simply. "Show me everything, the good and the difficult, then I'll decide." Adam nodded, seeming relieved by her response. "We'll start tomorrow. For now, I imagine you'd like to rest before dinner." "Actually," Penelope said, "I'd rather hear more about your carving." "Miguel seems quite taken with your creations." A smile tugged at the corner of Adam's mouth. "The boy's easily impressed." "I don't think so," Penelope countered. "He strikes me as quite discerning for his age." She moved to a side table where several small carvings were displayed, animals mostly, but also a delicately rendered rose. "These are truly beautiful, Adam." Adam joined her, picking up the rose. "I made this after my mother died," he said quietly. "Roses were her favorite. She tried for years to grow them here, but the climate was too harsh. Every spring she'd plant new ones, and every summer they'd wither in the heat. But she kept trying," Penelope noted. "She did," Adam confirmed, a fond smile softening his features. "She was stubborn that way. Said beautiful things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were against you." "I think I would have liked your mother," Penelope said softly. Adam looked at her, something intense and questioning in his gaze. "She would have liked you too," he said finally. "She always said the ranch needed a woman's touch, someone practical but with an eye for beauty." The compliment warmed Penelope more than she expected. "Tell me more about her," she requested, settling into a chair near the fire. "About your family growing up here." Adam sat across from her and began to speak, gradually relaxing as he shared stories of his childhood on the ranch. His parents had come west when he and Alfred were boys, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. Their early years had been difficult: drought, illness, conflicts with neighboring ranchers over water rights, but they had persevered. "My father never gave up," Adam said with quiet pride. "Even when others abandoned their claims and headed back east, he kept working, adapting his methods to suit the land rather than fighting against it." "That's where you learned," Penelope observed. Adam nodded. "Alfred took after our mother, always dreaming, always seeing what could be rather than what was. I was more like Pa, practical, focused on the day-to-day work of keeping things going." "You need both kinds of people to build something lasting," Penelope said thoughtfully. "The dreamers who see possibilities and the practical ones who make those dreams real." Adam looked at her with new appreciation. "That's exactly what my mother used to say." Their conversation continued, easy and unforced, until Alina appeared to summon them to dinner. The meal at the Martinez cabin was simple but delicious: a hearty stew, fresh bread, and preserved peaches for dessert. Miguel dominated the conversation, eager to tell Adam about everything that had happened during the storm. The adults exchanged amused glances over his animated chatter. As they walked back to the main house under a star-filled sky, Penelope felt a sense of contentment settling over her. "Thank you for today," she said, "for bringing me here, for introducing me to Martinez and Alina." "They're good people," Adam replied, "the best. I don't know what I'd have done without them after my parents died, and then Alfred." He trailed off, his expression clouding. Penelope waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "Alfred wasn't always easy to work with," Adam continued eventually. "He had big ideas but little patience for the daily grind. Martinez stuck with us even when Alfred's schemes nearly bankrupted the ranch. That kind of loyalty is rare." "How did you manage?" Penelope asked. "After your brother's plans didn't work out," Adam's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "We adapted, scaled back, focused on what the land would support rather than what we wished it would. It's been lean the past couple of years, but we're turning a corner now." Inside the main house, Adam lit lamps and built up the fire again. The space felt different at night, more intimate, with shadows dancing on the walls and the crackle of the fire the only sound. "I've had Alina prepare the guest room for you," Adam said, gesturing toward the stairs. "You'll find everything you need up there. My room is at the end of the hall if you need anything during the night." Penelope nodded, suddenly aware of the changed dynamic between them. At the Line cabin, close quarters had created an enforced intimacy. Here, with separate rooms and proper beds, they were back to the conventions of polite society. "Good night, then," she said, feeling unaccountably shy. Adam took a step toward her, then hesitated. "Penelope," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "Yes." She encouraged him. "I'm glad you're here," he said finally, the simple words carrying weight beyond their meaning. "Whatever you decide." Penelope summoned her courage and closed the distance between them. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed a brief, soft kiss to his lips. "I'm glad too," she whispered, then turned and hurried up the stairs before she could see his reaction. In the guest room, Penelope found a comfortable bed with fresh linens, a pitcher of water, and a small vase of dried wildflowers on the bedside table. Alina's welcoming touch. She prepared for bed in a daze, her mind full of the day's experiences and the growing certainty that she had found where she belonged. Sleep came quickly after the emotionally charged day, but Penelope's dreams were vivid images of the ranch in different seasons, of children playing in the yard, of Adam's face softened by laughter. When she woke at dawn, the dream fragments still clinging to her consciousness, she felt a sense of rightness that transcended logic. Dressing quickly in the clothes Alina had left for her, a simple skirt and blouse that had been hastily adjusted to fit her smaller frame, Penelope made her way downstairs. The main room was empty, but she heard movement in what she assumed was the kitchen. Following the sound, she found Adam at the stove attempting to prepare breakfast. "Good morning," she said from the doorway. Adam turned, a smile breaking across his face at the sight of her. "You're up early." "I'm used to early hours," Penelope replied, moving to join him at the stove. "May I help, please?" Adam said with obvious relief, stepping aside. "I was trying to make flapjacks, but I fear I'm making a mess of it." Penelope assessed the situation: a bowl of lumpy batter, a too-hot skillet, and a slightly harried rancher. "It just needs a lighter touch," she said diplomatically, taking the spoon from him. She adjusted the batter with a bit more milk, then lowered the heat under the skillet. As she worked, Adam leaned against the counter, watching her with an expression that made her cheeks warm. "You make it look easy," he observed. "Cooking was one of the few useful skills my mother insisted I learn," Penelope explained as she poured the first flapjack into the pan. She believed a woman should know how to run a household, regardless of whether she had servants to do the actual work. "Smart woman," Adam commented. "Though I imagine she didn't envision you using those skills on a ranch in the Arizona territory." Penelope laughed. "No, I don't believe that featured in her plans for me." She flipped the flapjack with a deft motion. "But I think she would have approved nonetheless. She always said the measure of a person wasn't in their circumstances, but in how they met them." They worked together to finish preparing breakfast, falling into an easy rhythm as if they had been doing this for years. When they sat down to eat, Penelope felt a domestic contentment she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. "What would you like to see first?" Adam asked as they finished their meal. "The ranch is too big to cover all in one day, but we could start with the areas closest to the house." "I'd like to see whatever you think is most important," Penelope replied. "What represents the heart of the operation?" Adam considered this. "The creek, then," he decided. "Everything else depends on it." After breakfast, they set out on horseback, Penelope once again mounted on Sadie. Adam had found a side saddle for her, which made riding in a skirt much more manageable. She was still nervous on horseback, but determined to master the skill if she was to make her life here. The creek Adam had mentioned lay about half a mile from the main house, meandering through a shallow valley. Even in winter, it flowed steadily, its banks lined with dormant vegetation that Adam assured her would burst into life come spring. "This is what makes our land valuable," Adam explained as they dismounted near the water's edge. "Year-round water is rare in these parts. We've been working on a system of irrigation channels to make better use of it during the dry months." He showed her the beginnings of these channels, carefully engineered ditches designed to direct water to the grazing areas and the small kitchen garden near the house. It was practical, ingenious work that spoke to Adam's methodical nature. "It's impressive," Penelope said sincerely. "How did you learn to do this?" "Trial and error, mostly," Adam admitted. "A lot of reading, too. There's a man in town, retired engineer, who's been generous with advice." From the creek, they rode to the grazing lands where the cattle were wintering. The herd was smaller than Penelope had expected, perhaps 50 head in total, huddled together against the cold. "We focus on quality over quantity," Adam explained when she commented on this. "Our beef fetches higher prices at market because the cattle are healthier, better fed. It's a strategy that's starting to pay off, though Alfred never fully embraced it." Throughout the morning, Adam showed Penelope more of the ranch operations: the hay storage, the equipment shed, the smokehouse, and the small orchard of apple trees that Alfred had planted on a whim and which, against all odds, had survived. "They don't produce much," Adam said of the trees, "but the fruit is sweet. Alina makes preserves every fall." By midday, Penelope had seen enough to appreciate both the challenges and the potential of Ingram Ranch. It was nothing like the grand cattle empire Alfred's letters had implied, but it was a living, working ranch with solid foundations and room to grow. They returned to the house for a simple lunch, during which Penelope shared her impressions and asked questions that revealed her quick understanding of the ranch's operations. Adam answered candidly, neither sugar-coating the difficulties nor downplaying the opportunities. "What do you think?" he asked finally when they had exhausted the practical topics. "Could you see yourself here?" Penelope considered her answer carefully. "I could," she said honestly. "It would be a very different life from what I've known, but not in ways that frighten me. The work is hard but meaningful." "And the people?" She met his eyes directly. "The people make me feel welcome." A smile spread slowly across Adam's face, transforming his features. "I'm glad to hear it," he said, his voice warm, "because I find myself hoping very much that you'll stay." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Adam rose to answer it, returning with Martinez, who carried a telegram in his hand. "From town," Martinez explained. "Senor Jackson brought it when he came to check the roads. He says the stage coach will run again tomorrow." Adam unfolded the paper, his expression growing grave as he read its contents. "It's for you," he said, handing it to Penelope. From Boston, Penelope took the telegram with apprehension. No one in Boston knew she was here. She had left no forwarding address. The message was brief but devastating. "Penelope stop grandmother, Mortimer gravely ill stop asks for you stop funds wired ticket office court site stop please return immediately stop lawyer Jenkins bad news." Adam asked, noting her stricken expression. Penelope nodded, her thoughts in turmoil. "My grandmother, I didn't even know she was in Boston. She lives in New York usually." She looked up at Adam. "She must have come looking for me after my parents died. We were never close, but she's my only remaining family." "You need to go," Adam said quietly, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Yes," Penelope agreed reluctantly. "At least to see her, to find out why she's asking for me now." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Martinez excused himself tactfully, leaving Adam and Penelope alone with the telegram that had so suddenly altered their plans. "Jackson says the stage leaves for Tucson tomorrow morning," Adam said finally. "From there you can catch the train east." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll take you into town tonight so you can be ready." "Adam," Penelope began, reaching for his hand, "this doesn't change how I feel about the ranch, about us." He squeezed her hand briefly before releasing it. "Family comes first," he said simply. "I understand that better than most." Penelope wanted to say more, to assure him that she would return once she had attended to her grandmother, but the words caught in her throat. How could she make such a promise when she had no idea what awaited her in Boston? The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of preparations. Alina helped Penelope adjust a few more clothing items for the journey, while Adam arranged for transportation into Quartzsite. They would leave after dinner, staying at the town's small hotel overnight so Penelope could catch the early stage. As they prepared to depart, Miguel presented Penelope with one of his wooden animals, a small carved horse that bore a striking resemblance to Sadie. "So you remember to come back," the boy said seriously. Penelope knelt to hug him, fighting back tears. "I'll treasure it," she promised. "And I won't forget." The ride to town was mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Quartzsite proved to be a small but growing settlement, a main street lined with basic businesses, a few side streets with modest homes, and the inevitable saloon doing brisk business despite the early hour. Adam escorted Penelope to the hotel, a two-story building that had seen better days but appeared clean enough. He spoke briefly with the proprietor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Holloway, who assured them that her room was available and that she would personally make sure Penelope made it onto the morning stage. "I've arranged to have your trunk brought here first thing in the morning," Adam told Penelope as they stood awkwardly in the hotel lobby. Martinez will bring it in the wagon. Thank you, Penelope said, wishing they weren't having this conversation in such a public place. There was so much she wanted to say, but not with Mrs. Holloway pretending not to eavesdrop from behind her desk. Adam seemed to sense her discomfort. Perhaps we could step outside for a moment, he suggested. I believe there's a bench on the porch. Outside, the evening air was crisp but not unbearably cold. The bench Adam had mentioned sat at the far end of the porch, offering a small measure of privacy. They sat side by side, not touching but close enough that Penelope could feel the warmth radiating from him. Adam, she began, then faltered, unsure how to express the tumult of emotions inside her. It's all right, he said gently. You don't need to explain. Family obligations are sacred. But it's not just about obligation, Penelope insisted. My grandmother and I, we were never close. She disapproved of my mother, thought my father married beneath his station. We haven't spoken in years, not since I was a child. For her to send for me now, something must be very wrong. Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. All the more reason for you to go. Yes, but... Penelope took a deep breath. I want you to know that these past days, they've meant something to me, something important. She met his gaze directly. I didn't expect to find someone like you when I came west, but now that I have, I don't want to lose you. Adam's expression softened, hope warring with caution in his eyes. What are you saying, Penelope? I'm saying that I want to come back, she said simply. Once I've seen my grandmother settled whatever needs settling, I want to return to the ranch, to you, if you'll have me. Adam reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. I'll be here, he promised, however long it takes. They sat in silence for a moment, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. I should let you rest, Adam said eventually, though he made no move to leave. You have an early start tomorrow. I know, Penelope agreed reluctantly, neither moved until Mrs. Holloway appeared at the door, clearing her throat pointedly. Getting chilly out here, she observed. Perhaps Miss Blackett would like to come in for some tea before retiring. Adam stood, helping Penelope to her feet. I'll see you in the morning, he said. I'll bring your trunk myself. Good night, Adam, Penelope said, wishing circumstances allowed for more than this formal farewell. As if reading her thoughts, Adam leaned down and pressed a brief, tender kiss to her lips. Good night, Penelope, he murmured. Sleep well. She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the lanterns of the main street, before following Mrs. Holloway inside. Despite the uncertainty of the journey ahead, Penelope fell asleep with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. True to his word, Adam appeared early the next morning with her trunk. They had a brief, awkward meeting in the hotel lobby, constrained by Mrs. Holloway's hovering presence and the imminent departure of the stagecoach. I've included something for the journey, Adam said, gesturing to the trunk. Just a small token. Before Penelope could ask what he meant, the stagecoach driver called for passengers to board. Their goodbye was necessarily brief, a clasping of hands, meaningful glances, and promises to write. I'll come back, Penelope assured him one last time as she prepared to board the coach. I'll be waiting, Adam replied, his voice steady though his eyes betrayed his emotion. The journey east was long and grueling. Penelope had almost forgotten how arduous stagecoach travel could be, and the train, while faster, was crowded and sooty. She kept her spirits up by writing detailed letters to Adam at each stop, describing her journey and reaffirming her intention to return once her family business was concluded. It wasn't until the second night on the train that she remembered Adam's mention of a token for the journey. Opening her trunk, she found a small package tucked between her dresses. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden lantern, a perfect miniature of the one she had been carrying when Adam found her in the storm. A small note accompanied it, to remind you of the light that guided you to me. Safe journey. Penelope clutched the carving to her heart, tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that no matter what awaited her in Boston, her future lay in Arizona with Adam. Boston, when she finally arrived, was just as she remembered, crowded, noisy, and draped in the trappings of civilization that now seemed strangely suffocating after her time in the open spaces of the West. A carriage was waiting for her at the station, sent by Lawyer Jenkins to convey her to her grandmother's home. The Mortimer mansion on Beacon Hill was imposing, its stone facade speaking of old money and entrenched privilege. Penelope, dusty from travel and dressed in her simple Western clothes, felt acutely out of place as she was ushered inside by a disapproving butler. Grandmother Mortimer was installed in the master bedroom, attended by a nurse and looking far frailer than Penelope remembered. The old woman's eyes, however, remained sharp as ever as she assessed her granddaughter. "So you came," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone reportedly near death. "I wasn't certain you would." "Your telegram suggested urgency," Penelope replied, taking the chair the nurse indicated beside the bed. "Of course I came." Agatha Mortimer studied her for a long moment. "You look different," she observed. "The West has changed you." Penelope wasn't sure if this was meant as a criticism or merely an observation. "I've only been gone a few months," she said. "Long enough, it seems." The old woman adjusted herself against her pillows. "I suppose you're wondering why I sent for you after all this time." "The thought had crossed my mind," Penelope admitted. Grandmother Mortimer signaled for the nurse to leave them alone. When the door closed behind her, the old woman's demeanor changed subtly, some of the imperious facade falling away. "I made a mistake, Penelope," she said bluntly. "Many years ago, when I cut ties with your mother for marrying your father. Pride is a terrible thing in the elderly. It calcifies, becomes impossible to break." She took a labored breath. "I regretted it eventually, tried to reconcile, but by then your mother wouldn't see me. Can't say I blame her." Penelope sat in stunned silence. This was not at all what she had expected. "When I heard about their deaths," Grandmother Mortimer continued, "I came to Boston immediately, but you were already gone. Took some time to track you down." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "A mail-order bride, Penelope. Your mother would have had apoplexy." "It was a practical decision," Penelope defended herself. "Oh, I'm not judging, not anymore." The old woman reached for a glass of water, her hand trembling slightly. "The point is, I'm dying. Not as quickly as that fool Jenkins implied in his telegram, but dying nonetheless. And I find I don't want to do it without making amends." "Amends," Penelope repeated. "For abandoning you and your mother," Grandmother Mortimer clarified impatiently. "Do try to keep up, girl. I've changed my will. You're my sole heir now, the house in New York, the investments, all of it. It's quite a substantial sum." Penelope felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. "But why? You barely know me." "You're my blood," the old woman said simply, "the last of the Mortimers. And perhaps I'm trying to buy my way into heaven if such a place exists." She fixed Penelope with a penetrating stare. "There is, however, one condition." "Of course there is," Penelope murmured, more to herself than her grandmother. "You must remain in Boston for 3 months," Grandmother Mortimer stated. "Live here in this house and let me get to know the woman my granddaughter has become. After that, you're free to do as you please with both the inheritance and your life. 3 months." The words echoed in Penelope's mind. 3 months away from Adam, from the ranch, from the future she had just begun to envision for herself. "I need to think about this," she said carefully. "Take all the time you need," Grandmother Mortimer replied, though her tone suggested she expected an immediate answer. "Though I should mention that, without the inheritance, your return to that ranch would be considerably more difficult. I understand transcontinental travel is not inexpensive." It was a blunt reminder of Penelope's financial reality. The funds she had brought west had been minimal, and most had been spent on her journey. Her return passage had been predicated on the ticket her grandmother had arranged. 3 months, Penelope repeated. "And then I'm free to leave with the inheritance, no further conditions." "You have my word," Grandmother Mortimer confirmed, "though I hope by then you might see the advantages of remaining in civilization." Penelope thought of Adam waiting for her in Arizona, of the promise of the ranch, of the connection they had begun to forge. But she also thought practically with her grandmother's inheritance. She could bring real improvements to the ranch, perhaps even expand it as Alfred had dreamed of doing. Very well, she agreed finally. 3 months, but I will be writing regularly to friends in Arizona, and I will be returning west when our agreement is fulfilled. A knowing gleam entered Grandmother Mortimer's eye. Friends, is it? Jenkins mentioned something about a rancher who aided you during a storm. Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks but maintained her composure. Mr. Ingram was very helpful, yes. I'm sure he was, the old woman said dryly. Well, write to your friend all you wish, who knows? 3 months in Boston society might change your perspective on the attractions of frontier life. Penelope doubted it, but saw no point in arguing. She had made her decision 3 months in Boston, then back to Adam and the ranch, hopefully with resources that would secure their future together. That evening, she wrote a long letter to Adam explaining the situation. She was careful to be absolutely clear about her intentions to return, emphasizing that the delay, while frustrating, would ultimately benefit them both. She described her grandmother with unvarnished honesty and outlined the terms of their agreement. 3 months feels like an eternity, she wrote, but I promise you, Adam, I will return. The inheritance will allow us to implement the improvements you've talked about: the expanded irrigation system, better breeding stock, perhaps even that windmill you mentioned. In the meantime, please write to me. Your letters will be my lifeline in this place that no longer feels like home. The weeks that followed settled into a routine. During the day, Penelope dutifully accompanied her grandmother to social events, endured fittings for a new wardrobe deemed appropriate for her station, and received instruction in the management of the considerable Mortimer estate. In the evenings, she wrote to Adam, pouring out her thoughts, her frustrations with Boston society, and her growing certainty that her future lay with him. Adam's replies came less frequently, limited by the constraints of ranch life and the uncertain mail service to the territory, but each letter was a treasure. He wrote of practical matters: the weather, the cattle, the progress of spring planting, but also of how he missed her, how the house felt empty without her presence, how he found himself carving new figures that increasingly resembled her. Elena says I'm mooning like a lovesick calf, he wrote in one letter, and perhaps she's right. But I find I don't mind the teasing if it means I'm counting the days until you return. As the end of the 3-month period approached, Grandmother Mortimer's health deteriorated noticeably. Despite her earlier dismissal of Jenkins' urgency, it became clear that she truly was failing. Penelope found herself torn between her commitment to Adam and her growing attachment to the grandmother she had only just begun to know. 2 weeks before the agreed-upon date of her departure, Penelope sat by her grandmother's bedside, reading aloud from one of the old woman's favorite books. Agatha Mortimer interrupted her suddenly. "You're still planning to leave, aren't you?" She asked, her voice weaker than it had been but her gaze still sharp. Penelope closed the book. "Yes," she admitted, "my ticket is purchased for the 15th. The old woman nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "You love him," she stated. It wasn't a question. Penelope didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Yes," she said simply. It was the first time she had acknowledged it aloud, though she had written the words to Adam in her most recent letter. "And the ranch. You truly prefer that hardscrabble existence to all this." Grandmother Mortimer gestured around the opulent bedroom. Penelope considered her answer carefully. "It's not about preferring hardship," she explained. "It's about finding meaning, purpose. In Boston, even with wealth and position, I would always be defined by social constraints: who I married, how I behaved, whether I conformed to expectations. At the ranch, I'm valued for what I can contribute, for the person I am. And this man, Adam, is it. He appreciates your mind as well as your pretty face." "He does," Penelope affirmed with absolute certainty. Grandmother Mortimer was quiet for a long moment, studying her granddaughter's face. "Your mother had that same look when she spoke about your father," she said finally. "I was too blind with pride to recognize it then for what it was: real love, not infatuation or rebellion." She sighed. "Go to him, Penelope. Don't wait the extra 2 weeks. An old woman's company is poor substitute for love, especially when that old woman wasted too many years on foolish pride. Penelope was stunned by this unexpected blessing. But our agreement, consider it fulfilled, Grandmother Mortimer interrupted. You've been more than patient with my demands and my endless reminiscing. Jenkins has the papers ready, I'll sign them today. The inheritance is yours to use as you see fit. Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll write occasionally, the old woman suggested with a hint of her usual briskness. Let me know that you're happy, that's payment enough. Penelope leaned forward to embrace her grandmother gently. I will, she promised. And perhaps, when you're stronger, you might visit us in Arizona. They both knew it was unlikely the journey would be too taxing for someone in Agatha Mortimer's condition, but the invitation meant something to them both nonetheless. 2 days later, with her inheritance secured and her grandmother's blessing, Penelope boarded the train west. Her trunk was considerably heavier than when she had arrived, filled not only with practical items for the ranch, but also with a few carefully chosen luxuries, books, fine linens, a proper tea service that she thought might bring a small touch of elegance to the ranch house. The journey seemed interminable, despite the relative comfort of first-class accommodations that her new financial status afforded. Penelope found herself increasingly impatient as familiar landmarks appeared, first the Mississippi, then the Great Plains, finally the mountains that signaled her approach to Arizona territory. She had telegraphed ahead to Quartzsite, informing Adam of her early return and the date she expected to arrive. As the stagecoach rattled into the small town, her heart raced with anticipation. Would he be there? Would things between them be the same after these months apart? The coach pulled to a stop in front of the hotel where they had said goodbye. As the dust settled, Penelope peered anxiously through the window, scanning the small crowd for Adam's tall figure. He was there, standing slightly apart from the others, his hat in his hands. Even at a distance, she could see the tension in his posture, the anxious way he watched the coach door. Penelope didn't wait for the driver to assist her. She pushed the door open and practically tumbled out in her haste to reach him. For a moment they stood frozen, drinking in the sight of each other, noting the small changes that months apart had wrought. Then Adam closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stopped just short of embracing her, suddenly hesitant, aware of the public setting and the curious eyes upon them. You came back, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I promised I would, Penelope reminded him. A smile broke across his face, transforming it in a way that made Penelope's heart skip. Yes, you did. He glanced at the coach, where the driver was unloading her trunks. You brought half of Boston with you, it seems, Penelope laughed. Not quite. Though I did bring a few things that might make life at the ranch more comfortable. She hesitated, uncertain how to tell him about the inheritance, not wanting him to think it changed anything fundamental between them. Adam seemed to sense her uncertainty. Let's get your things to the wagon, he suggested. We can talk privately on the ride back to the ranch. They loaded her trunks onto Adam's wagon, then began the journey home, for Penelope already thought of the ranch as home, despite having spent so little time there. As they left the town behind, Adam guided the horses to a stop in a small grove of trees beside the road. I need to say something before we go further, he said, turning to face her on the wagon seat. These past months, your letters, they've meant everything to me. But I need to be sure, absolutely sure, that you're here because you want to be, not out of obligation or a sense that you've made a commitment you must honor. Penelope reached for his hand. Adam Ingram, I have spent 3 months in Boston society, surrounded by wealth and comfort and every luxury imaginable. I had suitors, yes, multiple ones, she added at his raised eyebrow. Men of position and education who offered security and social standing. Not making me feel better, Adam muttered. Penelope squeezed his hand. My point is that I had options, Adam. I chose you. I chose this life, our life together at the ranch. Not out of obligation or lack of alternatives, but because it's what I want more than anything. The uncertainty in Adam's eyes cleared, replaced by a warmth that made Penelope's breath catch. "In that case," he said, "I have a question for you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a carved wooden ring, polished to a warm glow, with delicate whorls and patterns etched into its surface. "I made this while you were gone," Adam said, his voice steady though Penelope could feel a slight trembling in his hand. "It's not gold or diamonds, but it's perfect," Penelope interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. Adam took a deep breath. "Penelope Blackett, these past months have shown me that I don't want to live another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Penelope answered without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." Adam slipped the wooden ring onto her finger, a perfect fit that spoke to the care with which he had crafted it. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her a kiss that held all the longing and love that had built during their separation. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Penelope remembered she hadn't told him her news. "I have something to tell you," she said. "About my grandmother and why I was able to return early." As they continued their journey to the ranch, Penelope explained about the inheritance and what it could mean for their future together. Adam listened thoughtfully, asking questions that showed his practical nature but never once suggesting that the money changed his feelings or his proposal. "It's a blessing," he acknowledged when she had finished, "but not because of what it allows us to buy. Because it gives you security, independence. You're choosing to share your life with me, not because you need to, but because you want to." "Exactly," Penelope agreed, relieved by his understanding. They arrived at the ranch to find Alina had prepared a welcome feast. Martinez, his wife, and Miguel greeted Penelope with genuine warmth that confirmed her sense of homecoming. That evening, as they shared the news of their engagement, Penelope looked around at the faces of these people who had become her family and felt a contentment deeper than any she had known. Later, as she and Adam walked under the star-filled Arizona sky, he told her about the improvements he had begun in her absence, expanding the irrigation system, repairing the north pasture fence, planting more fruit trees that Alina had insisted would thrive with proper care. "I wanted it to be better for you when you returned," he admitted. More comfortable, more successful, Penelope stopped, turning to face him in the moonlight. "It was already everything I wanted," she assured him, "because you were here." Adam's expression softened as he gathered her into his arms. "Welcome home, Penelope," he murmured against her hair. "Home," she echoed, the word filling her with quiet joy. From the moment Adam had found her in that blizzard, following the light of her lantern through the storm, she had been on a journey home, not to a place, but to the man who now held her heart. 2 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Martinez and Alina as witnesses and Miguel proudly serving as ring-bearer. Penelope wore a dress ordered from Tucson, elegant but practical, and carried wildflowers Adam had gathered that morning from the meadow. The wooden ring remained on her finger, though Adam had surprised her with a simple gold band to accompany it. In the years that followed, Ingram Ranch flourished. The inheritance allowed for strategic improvements, better breeding stock, expanded water systems, eventually even the purchase of adjacent land when it became available. But more importantly, the partnership between Adam and Penelope proved to be the ranch's greatest strength. Her Eastern education and business sense complemented his practical knowledge and connection to the land, creating an operation that soon became a model for others in the territory. They faced challenges, of course, drought years, cattle disease, the normal hardships of life on the frontier. But they faced them together, their bond strengthening through each trial. Alina often remarked that they were like two hands working in perfect harmony, different but perfectly matched. Their family grew too. First came a son, William, who inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's quick mind. 2 years later, twins Robert and Rose completed their family, filling the once quiet ranch house with laughter and activity. On the 5th anniversary of the blizzard that had brought them together, Adam presented Penelope with a special gift, a lantern, handcrafted of copper and glass, more elegant than the simple one she had carried that fateful night, but reminiscent of it nonetheless. "To remember how you found your way to me," he said as he lit it, the warm glow illuminating the love in his eyes. "And how I found my heart when I found you." Penelope thought of the frightened young woman who had set out from Boston, seeking security and finding so much more. The journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be, standing beside the man she loved, building a life of purpose and meaning under the vast Arizona sky. "I think," she said, leaning into his embrace as they watched their children playing in the yard, "that we both found our way home that night." And as the sun set over Ingram Ranch, painting the desert in gold and crimson, the lantern's steady light reflected in their eyes a beacon of the love that had guided them through storms both literal and figurative, and would continue to light their way forward together.